But I'm also really excited that we've got a brand new guest, and it's Mathew Browne. Mathew, you should be excited because travel photography is actually starting back up for you, right? This is your area of passion.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, speaking about travel photography, I feel a bit of a fraud speaking about that today, given that we haven't done much of that for the last 18 months or whatever.
Yeah, but you
Um,
know what it's allowed us to do is take all those folders full of pictures that we were too busy to edit, and we are finally getting them out. But I see all these apology posts on Facebook of like, yeah, this was from my trip 3 years ago, not you. Like, but I'm finally getting around to editing them, or I found this great picture I wanted to share. So, you know, we'll be able to do more soon. You know, a lot of us depends on the part of the world, but you know, we are looking forward to seeing more people face to face.
Fingers crossed. Fingers
Yes.
crossed. It's been a tough old time, but it feels like there's some light at the end of the tunnel now.
Well, Matthew, what brought you to photography and what keeps you shooting pictures? What is it that you love so much about this art form?
Well, it comes back to the travel side of things, really. The reason I got into photography in the first place, it's interesting that Juliana was speaking about Iceland because it's directly related to that. I'd gone to Iceland to see the Northern Lights, a bucket list experience for a lot of us. And I'd gone with a little point and shoot camera, very low spec, and of course didn't quite get the results that I wanted. So in Reykjavik airport on the way home, I bought a copy of a camera magazine, and by the time I was in the car on the drive home from the airport, I was working out what DSLR to get, and I vowed that I would teach myself how to take decent pictures, and that was about 11 or 12 years ago now. I haven't actually been back to Iceland since, ironically enough. So it's still on my bucket list, getting a decent picture of the Northern Lights. But documenting my travels is what drew me to photography in the first place.
So Matthew, that's amazing, and we're looking forward to this. One small thing, your mic is super directional, so as you're turning your head, folks are having a little hard time hearing you. I don't know if there's a switch on it to change the pickup pattern, or maybe just put a little more in front of you or a little louder.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. It happens to all of us. I learned to cheat. You guys can't see it, but mine's right here. So as I move my body, it just moves with me. That's the only way it works for me. So
understood. Yeah, I got one of those Blue Yeti mics. It literally arrived from Amazon this morning, so I'm still getting used to it.
what you may see on the back of that mic is there's a little pattern, like a switch that has some different patterns. Turn it to the one that's heart shaped, and it's going to give you a better, fuller pickup pattern. There should be like one that has like two circles, one that
There we
has.
go. How's that?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Any better?
So what you just did is you embraced the cardioid pickup pattern, which is this nice full heart-shaped pickup pattern, and it's shipped in the default mode, which was this super directional, designed to pick up two people on opposite sides of the mic, sitting very still talking to each other. So as you were moving your head, you were cutting out. Now we hear you beautifully. So your mic is awesome. You just had to choose the right slider. So just
there
like
we go. There we go. Well, much like Luminar itself, you've got to have the right slider, right?
Absolutely. Well, good. Matthew, I'm excited. I don't want to get in the way of your presentation. I'll keep an eye on the chat pod and the Q&A, and I'll feed any questions in that people are asking, but take it away. We look forward to learning from you.
Great stuff. So I will just share my screen now. Bear with me a moment. Is that good? Can you see what I'm seeing?
Absolutely.
Great stuff. I've been following the talks most of today. Actually, I noticed in the chat boxes, people have been here all day. You should get a medal. It's a real marathon, all of this. But it's some of the things that have some of the topics rather that have come up repeatedly have been the idea of returning to images that maybe you didn't think were keepers and working out how to turn them into something that you like and something worth sharing. So to that end, I've got a couple of pictures from my travels that initially I wasn't too pleased with, but with the power of Luminar, I've been able to do something with them. So I'll start you off with this first one. It's one of those classic compositions from Singapore of these grand super trees. I only had one chance to grab this shot. It was during a stopover. And unfortunately, it wasn't the best night for it. It's quite overcast, a bit drizzly, and it wasn't quite how I pictured it when I looked at it at the back of the camera. But I'll show you now how I managed to take this from something I thought was a reject to something that is now in my portfolio. And this is the workflow I used for basically all of my cityscape photos, especially at night. So I don't know if you can see this on the stream, but it's bothering me. So the first thing is I can see some dust spots on this image, and very easy to get rid of those with the erase tool. Just click select and choose an appropriate brush radius and just paint in where you want to get rid of those spots. And there's probably more than just 4, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm sure that'll be ample. You hit the erase button, and as if by magic, give it a couple of moments, those spots are gone. Perfect. The next thing that I'll draw your attention to is under the light tool, you have this drop down where it says profile. Now it'll check Luminar default as standard. If you have the option available to you, camera flat does a really good job of evening out those tones instantly. If I just toggle this before and after, just a couple of clicks, and instantly we've got something, you know, really even and worth a look now. I'm a lot more pleased with the image than I was when I first saw it.
I love those profiles, Matthew, and those are called DCP Camera Profiles, which is a weird thing because technically it's a DNG camera profile. And so there's 3 ways to get those. One, if you've got Adobe Photoshop or Lightroom installed, we see the same ones they use. You can download and install the free Adobe DNG Converter utility, and that puts a bunch of them on your system. Or if you've got a tool like an X-Rite Color Checker or other ones, that actually creates custom ones for your camera. And there's a bunch of other ones out there. So the profile is just the DNG camera profile. And this is what Lightroom calls camera profiles. We're seeing the same things, but you're right there, because what you did there, which is beautiful, is you tapped into the recommended settings from your camera manufacturer and how they think the raw file should be decoded. And because every camera manufacturer is a little bit different, those profiles are really a secret to getting a great starting point.
Absolutely. It feels like a bit of a secret weapon when I'm teaching people this stuff. Very few people actually seem to know about this for whatever reason. But there we go. So returning to my point about the weather, it was a bit overcast and a bit drizzly. I'll just change the white balance slightly to cloudy, just punch a bit more warmth into the image. You'll see what it's done to those trees in the center already. We've just got a little bit more warmth. This is a really great foundation to build the image. Next thing I'll do is move up to the Enhance AI and Sky Enhancer. Now, this is something which, when I was playing around with this, you see them, if you move the slider right up, that's really overcooked. We don't need that. But if I pull it back to about a 30, it's just putting back that detail into the sky and also recovering some of that color as well, where it was quite dull before. And what I'll do as well is the same with Accent AI. I'll bring that up to 30 to match it. And you can just see straight away, look what that has done to that foreground. So much of the detail in this foliage was sort of lost, but instantly there it is back, and we can continue to work on this. The next thing I like to do with an image like this is introduce just a subtle vignette. Especially with an image like this, where you've got something really strong in the middle of your image, you want to draw your viewer through this image. So I'll apply a vignette, something about a minus, let's try a minus 60, it's a bit strong. Minus 50 is about the sweet spot. And I like to feather it quite a lot as well. So if I just toggle that off and back on again, you'll see it's a fairly subtle vignette, but what it does do is it is just drawing you through the image. There's no doubt now what you're meant to be looking at in this image. It's time now, I think, to just have a look at the colors in this image. So I like to move to the color harmony tool. And I think I'm going to punch just a bit more warmth into this. Let's see what 20 does. That's about right, I think. And if I may just draw your attention to split color warmth, this is really, really helpful because it allows you to control the cool tones and the warm tones separately. Now, at this point, I'm looking at the foliage and I don't really want to touch that. I think that looks okay. But I would like to enhance the warmer tones of the image. That meaning essentially the middle of these super trees where you can get that lovely brightness in the middle of them. So if I turn this way, way up just to show you what the effect does, you see how it's only affecting the tones that are already warm. This is great. So I don't need it quite that strong. I think I'll put it up to about 15. I think that looks just right. The key to a lot of my edits is I build up effects gradually. I don't like to just stick everything to plus 100 and hope for the best, you know. Just build the effects up subtly, and generally that comes to a more pleasing image at the end. Now this is almost there, I think, especially if you look at that before and after. It's come quite a long way. One last thing that I like to do with cityscape shots in the blue hour and at night is to have a look at the glow tool, and I'll change the drop down to glow and just observe what this does. I'll turn it right up to show you what it does at the top of the slider. And at this point, it's affecting the sky and the surrounding image. This isn't quite what we want, but if I just bring it down to about a plus 10, let's say, you'll notice that it is giving just a very, very subtle glow to the brightest parts of the image. And that really does set it off, I think. It's also affecting a couple of these lights in the middle ground as well. I'll just toggle that off and back on. And I think, well, I hope you'll agree with it on. I think it's looking really good. Now, there's only one thing left in the image now that I'm not quite happy with, and that's this foreground here. Now, these flowers should be kind of a warm pink color, but there's this blue tint to them, and they're a bit underexposed as well. It just doesn't look quite right. So what you can do here is you click on local masking, click add, click basic, and you can select a gradient mask. And I'm going to draw in a gradient mask just affecting the bottom of this image. So anything I do now with these sliders on the right will only affect this area of the image. And what I want to do is put some warmth back in. Like I said, these flowers were a kind of warm pink. So let's try and restore some of that. And also it's a bit underexposed. So let's bring that up. That's a bit too much, actually. Let's bring it down to about a 0.3 and maybe the warmth down to a 40. And for me now, I think this is pretty much the finished article. So I'll just toggle this off and on. So this is the before image where we've got all of that, you know, dynamic range, and it's a bit of a blue tint to everything. But now we've got something that's rich, it's vibrant, you know, it wouldn't look out of place in a travel brochure, and all of that from an image which initially I was not terribly pleased with. And that is the power of Luminar. I've got a couple of other images. I'm just checking the time. I realize we're halfway through. I don't think I'll get to do all of the images, so I'll take you to this one. Now, I mentioned at the start of this talk, Richard, the trip to Iceland that I went on, and I had a rather low spec point and click camera. Well, this was taken with that camera. And there's not a lot going on. It was, you know, as it tends to be in Europe, you know, dreadful weather, raining, and not a lot going on. This is just a very basic snapshot, which ordinarily would be a reject. But I see now that there is some potential here that I'd like to share with you. So first things first, we've got a lot of contrast in this image. I just want to get this to a place where I've got just a bit more to play with. So I'm going to take the highlights down because you've got that really blown out sky. Just bring the shadows up a touch and the exposure up a touch. That's probably going to blow the highlights back again, but we'll see what we can do about that. Now, you'll notice we've got this dull and featureless sky, which, you guessed it, makes it an ideal candidate for a sky replacement. That's exactly what we'll do here. Let me just bring up the selections. Now, some tips for you that I've sort of learned by doing in doing some sky replacements is it's always worth giving some consideration about the kind of sky that you're using as your sky replacement. So in this case, I am shooting in daytime. So ideally, I want to pick something that is also a daytime sky. You know, you could put a Milky Way into this, but I'm not sure it would look terribly convincing. So let's pick something that was also taken in daytime. But I'm also thinking about the mood of the image. This is a very sort of serious and stern expression. And I'm not sure that you know, a bouncy, fluffy sky like this, I'll just click on the first one. There we go. I mean, it's done a great job of replacing the sky, but in terms of the mood of the image, I think let's try something a bit more dramatic, like this is Blue Sky 4. And I should mention, you can of course get many more skies from the Skyline marketplace. I'm just using the ones that that come preloaded with Luminar for this demonstration. Now, it's done a great job of this. Just a few things that will really make it perfect, I think. I'd like to draw your attention to the sky orientation. Now, with this, you can move your sky left and right, of course, but crucially, you can also move it up and down. Why is this important? Well, this image was taken at about 50 millimeters, whereas the sky I'm replacing is quite a bit wider than that. And as a result, it doesn't quite look that convincing. If you lower the vertical position, it gives the effect of also zooming in on that area of sky. So now it's as if you're replacing the sky with a 50 millimeter sky, and it looks a lot more natural then. I'd also like to draw your attention to scene relighting. If I pull the relight strength all the way down to 0, and that, in fact, I'll flick it between 0 and 100 to illustrate this effect. You notice what's happening around this statue. At 0, you're getting this haloing effect around it. And it's a bit of a telltale sign that it's a sky replacement. So to have a convincing sky replacement, you want to find that sweet spot on this slider where that halo disappears. And in this case, it looks to me like it wants to be at about 45. And I think that's about it. I'll just toggle it before and after to show what we've already done. Already, I'm much happier with this image, but there's a few more things that I can recommend that really, you know, will take the image over the top. First of all, with a portrait, especially if it's, you know, a portrait of a statue or something like that, a vignette is a good idea, just like the last image, to draw the viewer through and concentrate on a particular area of image. What I'll do here is I'm going to make this a very extreme vignette, and I'm going to reduce the feathering completely. The reason I do this is because when I click on choose subject, it makes it so much easier to work out where the vignette is going to sit within this image, because I don't think I want it dead center. I want it just off center, somewhere down here.
And what I love about this, this is what a film person or a colorist in the movie industry would call a power window. So rather than just an even darkening of the corners, you now are doing an artistic directional lighting technique.
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what I'm going for. So yeah, once you're satisfied with where the vignette's sitting, and in this case I'm going to now turn the feathering back up, and in fact I'm going to increase the size because it's vignetting just a bit too much for my taste there. And then I'm going to reduce the amount. It doesn't need to be quite so extreme. I think a -60 will be just right for what we're doing here. That's great. Now Now, there's a few more things you can do in terms of coloring the image. The mood tool is something I always rely on. And there's so many great LUTs that you got in here right out of the box. I do believe, Richard, these analog looks, were they yours?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
And
Yeah.
I'll put the link in for those right now. Actually, yeah, that's 100 pack of analog. So, and you've actually hacked the folder and added them in there. So that's cool.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, I'm a web developer by trade, so you know, hacking comes with the territory.
We
But
will make it easier in the future to tuck more LUTs in there. Right now, what'll happen here is we always, if you do that, just make sure you back them up, because when you upgrade, they may not stay. But yeah, you've
oh,
got a couple of
absolutely. I
cool
found
ones
that
in
out the
there
hard way.
for sure.
I didn't feel quite so clever then. um, anyway, worth mentioning to everybody as well, you can get more LUT packs on Skyline Marketplace, of course. Some of them are free also. There's a couple of really nice paid ones as well. Really worth checking those out, because these can be just one-click edits in so many cases. They're really wonderful. Anyway, I think the one I'm going to go for is this one, the Latify Chrome. This one works really nicely on statues and monuments. I use this quite heavily. And I'll turn this right up to about 70, I think. I love the effect. And I'll put the contrast up as well. And if I'll just toggle that off and on so you can see what it's doing. It's giving it that really cinematic and epic look, which suits the mood of this image perfectly. So I'll keep that as it is. And another thing worth considering, if you're doing if you're taking a picture of a monument or a statue, have a look at the high key tool, which is found under portrait. And what I like to do, just as a starting point, is set everything to 20 and just see how the effect works right out of the box before you really do anything further. So I'll turn that off and then toggle it back on and see just how it looks before and after. And I think I'll stick with that. In fact, I may just push the blacks up to about 40 just to recover a bit more of the shadow detail. But there we go. In just a couple of clicks, really, you've gone from something that was a surefire reject to something that I'm really pleased with. Actually, is something that's in my portfolio now. I just love it. Now, with an image like this can also lend itself quite well to black and white as well. So I'll just quickly show you how that'll work. Obviously, the black and white tool, hit that convert to black and white button, and Luminar works its magic. The only thing I may change with the black and white rendition is just make the vignette a bit more pronounced, and maybe add just a touch of inner light to the vignette, just to bring a bit more light onto that statue. And there we go. I think I'm satisfied with that edit now. How are we doing?
Looking great,
time?
Matthew.
I'm nearly at the end, actually. Crikey.
You're doing great. I just wanted to mention to folks that you were being also quite humble. You have more template and sky packs than anyone else. So you can actually see that in there. And I put the links in the chat, as well as the $10 off code that people can use to get it. Darlene, the histogram is visible there. It's the little one he's got off to the side there. So
there we go. Yeah, well, yes, I ought to mention as well, if we do have any customers of my Sky Packs or my Signature Lux pack, thank you very much for your custom. I appreciate that. I've had some very nice emails actually over the last few months from people who have used them and sent me emails to pictures of their work and that sort of thing. So it's very rewarding being a Skylum ambassador.
Matthew, before you leave this image, there's one thing I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just humoring me on. If you scroll to the bottom, one of the tools we've been emphasizing today is super contrast for black and white.
Of course.
It just is awesome for bringing out those highlights. So if you move the highlight contrast over, maybe to 20 or so, and then you play with that balance, you'll see that like it allows you to basically lift or pull down the shadows or the highlights. And so it's just a nicer way. Unlike a curve or a shadow, it doesn't produce a halo. So it's a very nice one here to sort of even out your black point and your white point.
Yeah, I mean, I think super contrast features quite heavily in the LUTS packs that we just discussed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in cityscapes, it's magic for that. But there we go. I unfortunately, due to time constraints, I don't think I've got the time to take you through any of the other images, but I do hope that was
Why don't you show us
helpful.
one thing with one of them that's on your mind? We got about 4 minutes here, so pick an image
Okay.
and just explain, or even feel free to show one of your templates in action if you've got a solution for it, or just explain the logic of how you look at the image and identify what's wrong. Because a
Well,
lot of times people struggle with that.
I tell you what, I'll give you the main takeaway point of this image. This is just a picture of a lemur that I took in a wildlife park. It's only about half an hour from me. This is all we have in the way of traveling lately. But I'll just raise the exposure so you can see what I'm doing, and very, very quickly, composition AI will hopefully do a very good job of chopping out the other lemur that features there. I'll just hit edit to enter rather to save that. Now, very quick hack for anybody doing portrait photography or nature photography, to sort of simulate that lovely blurred effect in the foreground and background. What I like to do is take structure AI, move the slider to -100.
Yep.
Now, bear with me one moment, because what you can then do is apply a radial mask to the lemur like so.
Yep. Very nice.
And I'm only doing this very quickly as a demonstration, but if I just toggle that off and on, you can see just how quickly, or rather I'll toggle the structure off and on. Instantly, it's a bit of a diet bokeh effect, I think you can call it. I know
Absolutely.
we've got a bokeh AI coming, but this does a pretty good job also.
Bokeh AI is designed initially for people, and negative structure is awesome. So many of our tools do have negative values, just like our Vignette has center light, so you can add light. So sometimes you overdo tools when you don't use the positive or the negative value.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is one of the things that I honestly found it by accident. I saw it one day and I thought, wow, this is a really nice effect, you know. So so there we go. That was the main takeaway from this image.
And Matthew, if you go into your local adjustment tools for a second and open that up. So what's really cool there is, besides having the ability to mask, if you had a basic adjustment, you're going to see that you also have that ability there to do structure as an adjustment layer. So if you want to do multiple instances of this at different intensities, you could do negative structure there with masks as well and have multiple copies, like exactly like you did there, like to blur the foreground a little bit more for a tilt shift.
So now it sort of looks like I was physically in the grass taking the picture. I wasn't, but there we go. I've managed to do that in 2 clicks with the gradient.
What I would do with that,
awesome.
like, I love doing that with that local mask, because then you could darken the foreground a hint or play with the shadows versus the highlights, and it just makes it look like you said, like you were down there in the grass. It gives it that angle, and that's so great because you're driving the focus to your subject. Well done on that. Negative structure is not something most people come across. Of course, most people also don't have 8 packs for sale in the store. You are definitely a master of using these tools.
Well, you know, if I may pat myself on the back, I'm fairly prolific with it. So, so there we go.
Well, good, folks. You can see there that there's some links there. And if you just go to the marketplace, you can easily search for Mathew and you'll find his templates and others there. So should be fine. Just go ahead and check that out. And if you use that code DEEPDIVE2, you could save $10 on any of the ones that you want to pick up. Mathew, if folks want to learn more about your photography and you, where should they check you out?
Well, if you just punch my name into Google, Mathew Browne, 1 T in Matthew and an E at the end of Brown, because I'm awkward with my spelling, you'll tend to find me in most places. And because I spell my name a funny way, I tend to find that, you know, I can get all the usernames just right. So yeah, just punch my name in. You'll find me on the usual places: Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you'll also find me on photohound.co, which is it's a travel photography community that I'm the co-founder of. So hopefully some of you who enjoy your travel photography might want to join us there. Free to sign up.
Nice. Well, Matthew, thanks for joining, and great use of masking today. I think that's one of my favorite things of Luminar, that without having to use a bunch of layers and flattened effects, everything's live. You could just precisely dial in where you want those things to go. So
Absolutely.
great job taking advantage of those masks. All right.
Fantastic. Thanks for hosting me.
Sure, absolutely.